Welcome into a brand new hour of CBS Sports HQ. Tommy Tran, Brady Quinn. I'm Jacqueline D'Agostino. The NFL draft is officially in the books, and our guy Pete Prisco working overtime, maybe.
No, he's never working on the beach.
Yeah.
Pete Prisco.
When he was on the beach, he was giving out grades, and then of course we always have Brady here to keep Pete accountable.
Try to.
For all of his grades, Tommy.
Yeah, Pete's put together the grades. Brady will chime in to see if he agrees, disagrees, anything post-draft that we need to know about. So Pete Prisco put out his grades that you can catch on CBSSports.com. We kind of highlighted the big ones here. Best grades, he gave a handful of A's with the Commanders, the only A+. Conversely, worst grades, lots of C's. I don't see any D's
yeah,
or
that's
F's
not that bad,
there.
right? Like a C-.
Maybe that's like an F in the Pete Prisco book. We'll have to wait and see. Let's bring in the aforementioned power rankings guru and this post-grade draft list. Pete Prisco joining us from home. So, Pete, let's start with the Atlanta Falcons here. You give them a C-. How much of that has to do with the Michael Penix selection at 8th overall, and what did you think of their draft in totality?
By the way, no D's or F's. I kind of graded like the professors did when Brady turned in his work at Notre Dame automatically. No D or F for the quarterback, no matter what he did. He could have just signed his name and he got an A or a B. Come on.
Janetto Tusa, counting two. I got a D in that class. I can tell you firsthand, there was no special considerations. That was one of the worst grades I ever got, and there was a couple more D's outside of that. So.
Look, when it comes to the Atlanta Falcons, I gave them a C- because I didn't like what they did, in large part because I don't mind the pick of Michael Penix, but if you had any inclination that you were going to take a quarterback at number 8, why in the hell did you pay Kirk Cousins? It makes no sense to me. You can't have both, and that's why I kind of pinged them on the move. I do like Michael Penix as a quarterback. I think he's going to be a good player, but when does he play? That's the multi-million-dollar question. The other move they made, I didn't like moving up for the defensive tackle out of Clemson. I thought that was a bit rich for them. So I didn't love their draft, in large part because I think if you're going to go for it with Kirk Cousins, you should have went for it. If you're not going to go for it with Kirk Cousins, you should not have signed him to that contract.
The interesting thing about this is Pete is basically basing his grade off of only the first and second round, which he must not have looked at the rest of the draft for the Atlanta Falcons, because I love what they did after the fact. They gave Braylon Trice, which edge was the big thing. That's where everyone thought they were going with the number 8 overall pick. Instead, they get good value in Braylon Trice, who I thought was going to be more of a second-round grader value. They get him the third round there. Brandon Dorlus, maybe one of my favorite picks of this entire draft. People kept talking about how Grady Jarrett is getting up there in age. Maybe they linked Byron Murphy in the first round of the Falcons. Instead, they get Brandon Dorlus, who was one of the players that popped. They get him in the 4th round. J.D. Bertrand, Jace McClellan, both guys will be contributors not only on special teams but also on their respective sides of the football. And Casey Washington, a little bit more of a project in the 6th round of wide receiver, but still some upside and ability. So here's the thing that I'd say about the quarterback spot is Pete wants to make it about the fact, well, they paid Kirk Cousins $100 million. It's not your money, Pete. Why do you care? The biggest issue for this team in the past few years has been quarterback. They go out and sign the top free agent, give him $100 million guaranteed, so you're good for the next 2 years with him. And then you've got your quarterback in waiting you took in the 1st round, which to the point of Terry Fontenot and everyone else who's talked about it, if they're drafting in the teens or the 20s, assuming they play well the next couple of seasons, they're not going to have the ability to take a quarterback that they love. And if they love Michael Penix, none of this matters.
Well, I just wouldn't have signed Kirk Cousins if I'm drafting a young quarterback. It's just that simple. I'm playing him. I'm getting other people around him with the money I save from paying Kirk Cousins, and I have a better team for the future. If you're looking to the future, then look to the future. I mean, save that money that you gave Kirk Cousins. This team is not a Super Bowl team as it's constructed right now with Kirk Cousins. So if you're going to draft a quarterback, you should have just held off and waited until you drafted your quarterback.
The thing where I disagree with that sentiment, too, is not that they're not a Super Bowl team. They are a team that I know that's the favorite to win the division. They are a team that could make a run potentially in the NFC. We never know until we get to the playoffs. But the thing that Pete's not taking into account is, had they not signed Kirk Cousins, everyone would be pointing at that and saying they're going to take a quarterback at 8. Who knows then if they can even stay at 8 and take Michael Penix? All we heard about before the draft was after the top 3 consensus guys, which was Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, was, oh, then it's J.J. McCarthy. Then it's J.J. McCarthy. Everyone talked that it was a polarizing pick. A lot of teams like Michael Penix that I talked to, and they were like, you know, actually we had Michael Penix higher on our draft boards than even Drake May, for example. So it's a bit surprising that Pete doesn't see the fact that had they not taken Cousins, it was the biggest surprise of the draft because everyone assumed they weren't going to take a quarterback. It probably would have changed, I think, how some of those teams operated that did need a quarterback behind Atlanta.
So all in all, Pete is giving them a C-, and we're sticking with the C- crew, and that leaves us to the Browns as well. They did not have a first-round pick, of course, because of the Deshaun Watson trade. But Pete, tell us why you're giving them a C- for their draft grade.
Well, also, when you look at what they did the rest of the draft, I didn't like the rest of their draft either. And you know, you do get pinged for the Deshaun Watson trade. I mean, you don't have a #1 pick, you don't have a first-round pick. And so far, the bang for the buck hasn't come back to you for Deshaun Watson. Let's be real. It hasn't worked out. I mean, they went to the postseason without him. Now the pressure's firmly on him to take that team to the playoffs. You know, I didn't love Michael Hall in the second round. You know, that's a little high for me. Zach Zinner. You know, look, they have a great track record with guards, so I'm not going to hard to argue with that one. Thrash is an interesting player. He's the one guy in this group that I did love. I didn't love their draft, but in large part because they're still paying the price for, you know, Deshaun Watson, which hasn't worked out.
Well, I'm not going to speak about the Deshaun Watson because he was not even part of this, and I understand that was part of the draft capital utilized. But if you do look at some of the players they did take, I disagree with Pete. Michael Hall Jr. was one of the better interior defensive tackles in this draft class. I think he's going to show that once he gets to Cleveland. Zach Zinner was the best offensive lineman before he got injured this past year for Michigan, and you can make the case that it's a need. They need it from a depth standpoint, so I have no problem with this pick. In fact, I love this pick, and had he not gotten hurt, probably would have been a second-round pick in this case. Then you go to Jamari Thrash. If you want to look at a playmaker, just turn on his tape. He's going to fit in their offensive scheme in a variety of ways and be able to create big plays, potentially even help out on some special teams as well. And then Jawan Briggs, a 7th round. A lot of times we look at these guys as flyers. He was an impactful player for Cincinnati's defense up front. It'll be an uphill battle for him to be able to find his way into the starting lineup, but could be a guy that I think down the road develops into a potential guy to help out with depth, but also potentially a starter.
Finally, I think, too, after this draft, we can close the book on the Deshaun Watson trade because all that draft capital got used up, so we won't be talking about that maybe at least until future drafts there. All right, let's flip the script just a little bit because we're going to talk about teams that Pete gave an A grade to, okay? One of them is going to be the champs in the Kansas City Chiefs. So, Brady, do you agree with Pete giving an A, and what questions, if any, do you have in terms of their draft for Pete?
Well, I want to first start off with Pete because, Pete, you had J-Dex going in your very last mock where you thought guys were going to go in the first round. He dropped to the 4th round, which I look at it and say it's tremendous value. I wasn't with you with him necessarily making the first round. I thought maybe 2nd, 3rd round made a little bit more sense. Nonetheless, a need and obviously a solid, you know, I guess fill for their defense at that spot. But you weren't wild about the top of this draft, which is surprising why you gave them an A. I thought you didn't like necessarily their 2nd round pick. And there's the mock right there, 29th overall, Pete.
Yeah, well, look, I still think the kid's going to be a big-time safety in this league. So the league missed. I was right. So, okay, they've done that before. You wait and see. He's going to be a game-changing safety on the back end for the Chiefs down the road. I love the kid. He should have gone in the first round. They'll regret it. I will be right again. But as far as their draft, getting Worthy matters because it gives them a speed element. Would I have done that? Probably not, but I understand it. The tackle from BYU, they wanted him in the first round. They were thinking about taking him at the first round if Worthy wasn't there, so you get great value. But more than that, the middle picks, I think, you know, Wiley, you know, I loved him as a tight end. I think he's going to be a really nice addition to their offense. I think Hicks down the road will be an all-pro safety. The center they drafted out of Penn State could end up being a guy down the road that plays. So, look, when you look at their group, it was a good, really solid group. And if Worthy is what they think he is, watch out.
There's no doubt about it. Worthy, Hollywood Brown next to each other. It presents a lot of different issues with their speed. The Wiley pick is interesting only because Travis Kelce is obviously more of a pass-catching option at tight end. Wiley was kind of that at TCU, too. Not saying that he's not capable of blocking. I think I'd describe more as a willing blocker, but he's not your traditional wide tight end that you typically see with that frame and size. He's capable of it, but he's also not a guy who's played tight end his entire life, so there might be some development there, but he's got time if you're playing behind Travis Kelce. But to Pete's point, like, I think he gave this class an A, even though he dinged him in a couple spots maybe he was talking about, but Hicks is really what does it for him. I like the entirety of this draft. As Pete kind of touched on, top to bottom, I think they did a tremendous job filling needs, but also finding players that I think can make the roster, and that's one of the biggest points you got to talk about nowadays is if you're going to spend draft picks, you don't want these guys to be guys who don't end up making your final 53. You want to make sure they can make your roster and contribute to your football team. A lot of times, sometimes those back-end picks end up just sliding or finding their way to the practice squad.
And as we mentioned off the top, a handful of teams that received an A, of course, the Chiefs and then the Cardinals as well, taking Marvin Harrison Jr. in the first round. And Brady, in Pete's article, he talks about their decision to take a running back, Trey Benson, in the third round. That's a big reason why he gave them an A. We know how Pete feels about drafting running backs and when to take them. But do you agree with his A grade there for Arizona?
Well, I wouldn't base it purely just off Trey Benson. I think it's a good pick, good value for where they got him at. I'd look at Max Melton in the second round at cornerback. He's going to be a solid contributor right away. We can obviously look at Darius Robinson too. Being able to get him as your second first-round pick, that was a huge need, and I think he's going to be an impactful player on their defense. So, again, combing through the rest of this draft, my two favorite players are Xavier Thomas out of Clemson, who, you know, when you were coming out initially out of high school, he was viewed as one of the top prospects. Never really developed into that player at Clemson. Maybe he will now, though, with NFL coaching, a little more time to develop. And then as you look down the list a little bit further, it's Christian Jones. I think he can develop into a starting right tackle for this group. He's got the size, athleticism, ability, still a little bit more development, but I really liked what Arizona did top to bottom in their draft, finding value at each one of those rounds.
Watch out for the Cardinals. And I say that seriously. And people are going to laugh at me. And we watched them all last year, Brady, and every single week, what do we say? Man, they play hard. They play tough. They're a pain for everybody they play. Jonathan Gannon did a great job with that defense and that team last year. They play tough and physical. Now they have more talent. I love this draft. Look, I would have taken Neighbors over Harrison, but I'm splitting hairs there. He's going to be a great receiver. You look at up and down, good football players, for a lot of productive football players from good programs. I really like what they did. The only one I maybe nitpicked a little bit with was the Ryman tight end. He's more of a blocker. He's not what I would have taken there, but I get it when you have McBride who can catch the football. So I love what the Cardinals did, and watch out for Arizona. They could be a playoff team in 2024.
We know Kyler Murray was on X, you know, posting his fair share of emojis, saying that he approved of the draft as well. Brady Quinn, Pete Prisco here. We are talking about Pete's draft grades, and of course, you can find the full list over on CBSSports.com. Never too early, gentlemen, to look ahead to 2025. Taking a look at the odds to be the #1 overall pick about a year from now. Shedeur Sanders, Carson Beck, and Quinn Ewers. Pair of quarterbacks there.
James Pierce, that's good value. I'm telling you right now. James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee, that's some good value if you can get it right now.